Hi and welcome to the short and sweet of the lifetime repertoires at the Najdorf Sicilian. In this video, we're going to touch on some of the exciting lines on of the Najdorf, and hopefully you'll get excited, interested in the opening, and it will inspire you to start playing the Najdorf, and then perhaps, who knows, maybe even take a look at the actual lifetime repertoire course that I've done. So this has to be short, it has to be sweet, so let's jump straight into it. There's a lot to cover. My approach to this, I finally decided, will be that I will look at most of the variations, but of course there will be no time to cover all of them in great depth, so you'll get some idea of what it's going to be like, and I've tried to select a portion of nice and instructive lines that will hopefully inspire you to start your Najdorf journey. So Najdorf is the opening that arises after moves e4, c5, knight f3, d6. This is the c5 is the Sicilian. Najdorf we play against the open Sicilian. Open Sicilian is 3d4, c9 d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6. And I will start with the main lines, and slowly we'll go down all the way until we finally will briefly touch upon the second move sidelines. So here, one of the biggest lines, perhaps the biggest one, is the line with bishop g5, highly theoretical. Let's look at one variation from the sidelines chapter. E6 is what I recommend, f4, bishop e7, queen f3, queen c7. And I'm not going to explain everything in detail because I'm afraid we'll run out of time this way, but let's just enjoy the beautiful lines. I promise they're going to be nice. So sideline that I'm going to cover here is the ninth move f5. Very interesting line, not very popular, but actually very challenging as well. Here I recommend knight c6. Gotta challenge this knight. Knight c6 is one of the options. Now we take with the b pawn, open the b file. G4 is one of the moves here that I consider. And here we go d5, strike in the center, open the bishop, and next we want to bring the rook on the open b file and start our counterplay. Long castle is the main move, and now rook b8. And we are ready to hit white where it hurts on the b2 square, bring the queen to b6 or a5. A very instructive line is bishop f4, e5, bishop g3. Here we castle first. Now if white goes g5, we can take on e4, and then later the pawn on g5 will hang. That's why white goes h4 in this particular line. And here, very strong is to start the concrete action, take on e4, knight takes e4, and play queen a5. We hit, first of all, the a2 pawn, but there are also other ideas, like after bishop c4, we now have a very strong idea. Perhaps you can find it, perhaps not. Knight takes e4, queen e4, and rook takes b2. Very strong resource. And now if king takes b2, we go bishop a3 check, and we either deliver checkmate, or after king b1, queen b4, bishop b3, win the queen on e4. That is a very beautiful line. 19 queen e5 is a better defense, and then we play queen a3, threatening a discovered check, and after queen b2, queen g3, we keep a very strong bishop, and white king is very open, and black has, at the very least, enough compensation for the exchange. And queen a3 is actually an attempt to play for an advantage, because queen takes c5 would also be just equality. That is a trainable line on the sidelines. Let's go from the start. On another line within bishop g5 system, e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, takes, knight f6, knight c3, a6, bishop g5 again, e6, f4, bishop b7, queen f3, queen c7, and after a long castle, which is the main move, knight b7, this time we'll look at a bishop d3 system. Bishop d3, I recommend b5, intending to develop the bishop. e5 is met by bishop b7, rook h1, bishop b7, and here white has a ton of options. But there is a direct sacrifice, knight d5, which is not the most popular one, but it is actually still quite tricky, and black has to know how to play. So after e d5, knight f5, white is piling up the pressure here on the e file. So black has to run away with the king, king f8, hiding the king from the file, unpinning the bishop. And now e takes d5 is a better move. But the line I will show is also very instructive, queen g3. The move is actually losing, but black has to defend very well. And in this particular line of the Najdorf, black has to be quite precise. We take the pawn, d4, bishop e4, and after bishop e4, rook e4, this is a very good moment to pause. And black has to find a very strong defense. It's not easy. If you take on e4, white will take on e7 with check and then take on g7. And it's not obvious what to play, but we have a very strong move, queen c5, hitting the knight, inducing knight takes e7, after which we will take then on e4 the rook. And then the bishop no longer has the check. So a very strong, sophisticated idea, this queen c5 move. And the best white has is bishop h6. Still looks very dangerous. Queen g7 is incoming, and rook e7 does as well. But here we take the rook, knight takes e4, and after queen g7, king e8, queen h8, we guard the f8 square with knight f8. And at the end of the day, we have an extra piece. So sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do, as they say. Another line I'd like to show you, the last one now, from the bishop g5, knight of e4 c5, knight f3 d6, d4, takes, knight f6, knight c3, a6, bishop g5, e6, f4, bishop e7, queen f3, queen c7, once again long castle, knight b7, and here g4. This is the main line. And here my recommendation is, I actually give two options, but h6 is the main recommendation. There is an exciting idea after the main move bishop takes f6, but here let's look at the move queen h3. This turned out to be also very testing, and I recommend the move knight c5. And I'd like to show you a very beautiful line after bishop g2. Rook g8, strong idea. We get out of the pin, and we want to take the bishop on g5. And after bishop f6, white has a few options. Rather testing one is the move b4, hitting the knight. And we have to play knight d7. And here white has a very interesting idea to sacrifice a couple of pawns and go for the attack with g5, h5, and now e5. And here, if we were to take the e5 pawn with d takes e5, white would unleash knight takes e6. That would be tremendously dangerous, would be winning for white. Instead, black here shows the understanding and makes sure the king is safe by sacrificing the piece with knight takes e5, f takes e5, and bishop e5. And black has a tremendous compensation for the piece. We have a bunch of pawns. If we count it briefly, 3 pawns, which is more than enough, and a strong bishop. The before weakening is going to matter. And here the line continues. White goes rook h1. Very strong idea. Bishop d7, rook takes e5, sacrificing back some material. And after d5, knight b3. Position is very messy. We go rook d8. After knight c5, we play bishop c8. And position is just very, very unclear. But black is not doing so badly here, to use an understatement. Another line I'm going to look at now is the line arising after 6 move bishop e3, e4 c5, knight f3 d6, d4, c3 knight d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6, and here bishop e3. I recommend the move e5, and first we'll look at the move knight f3. Bishop e7, and main line here is bishop c4, but also a very exciting line is knight d2, a new challenging line. Knight is heading towards b6 after knight c4. Black has to play b5, and then white plays a4. After b4, knight d5, white has provoked our pawn to b4, and we'll try to use its weakness. We take on d5, e5, and now we castle, and here we get an interesting position. White has some queenside trumps. Our pawn on b4, as I mentioned, is pretty weak. But we want to start our own play on the kingside with f5. That's going to be fun. Knight c4, knight d7 first, developing the knight. a5, and here f5. Starting some play on the king side, f3, and here we start with a very dynamic play. First we go f4, after bishop f2 we go bishop h4. We want to trade the dark squared bishops, and after g3, a very strong and a very concrete idea, e4, a nice little temporary piece sack. After gh we go e3 with a tremendous initiative. White will have to give back a piece here. These pawns are monstrous. And if white goes f4, then we go bishop g5, and we are happy to have gotten rid of this e5 pawn. We have this e5 square for the knight, and after bishop d3, queen f6, castle, knight e5, we sacrificed one pawn, but we have all these diagonals and files for the attack. We'll play bishop h3, got this strong pressure along the f file, this beautiful e5 square. Black's doing very well here, a very exciting little sideline. The other line, e4 c5, knight f3 d6, d4, cd4, knight d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6 once again. And after bishop e3, e5, I'd like to look at 7 knight b3 here. I recommend bishop e7. f3, this is a so-called English attack setup. White is going for f3, bishop e3, queen d2. Then he was to castle along and push the g pawn. but we don't let him do that. After bishop e6, queen d2, I recommend h5. It's a trendy and fresh system that caught some popularity. I played it myself, but also Magnus Carlsen played it with the black pieces after he has faced it first against Dinglerian with white. Here, knight d5 is the line I will look at. There are also alternatives, bishop e2 and long castle. But knight d5 is quite critical. Now my main recommendation is knight takes d5, but for this short and sweet, I will show you my alternative solution. A very exciting new idea. It is also very, very beautiful, so I'm very happy to share it with you here. Bishop d5, e d5, knight b7. Long castle, white has to, well, doesn't have to, but most critical is if white castle is long. We play queen c7, intending knight b6, so c4 is the best move. And now we play a5, king b1, and here we castle first, and after knight a1. White intends to go knight c2, knight a3, and then knight to b5, cementing the queen side, making sure we don't get the counterplay. But it is tad optimistic by white because we have a very strong idea, a4, and after knight c2, a3, opening the files at all costs. And if white takes with knight on a3, a very beautiful exchange sacrifice, rook takes a3, b takes a3, and now this is a beautiful position I was going for. If you look at what's happening here, let's say rook a8. Next we'll play knight to c5. We have sacrificed in exchange and a pawn, but white has a very open king. The b file is here open. The diagonal is also open. Bishop is likely to land on f6 eventually, and we have this gorgeous c5 square. Now that white doesn't have a pawn on the b file, we'll play knight c5 next, then bring the other one to d7. Bishop will come to f6, and yeah, I believe black is the one having all the fun here. And although here the engine gives white some advantage, greedy and brilliant defender engine probably will find a way to defend against this attack. But in terms of human play, I think it's a wonderful idea. It's also a new idea. I believe this short castle and then a4, a3 is entirely new, and I think it's a perfect extra option. And again, also I give knight takes d5 in my main course as the main reliable alternative. There, the computer is very happy throughout. That is for the line 6 bishop e3. Another line I'd like to look at is 6 h3, e4 c5, knight f3 d6, d4, c d4, knight d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6, and now h3. Here we play e5, and I will look at both knight b3 and knight d2. First, knight b3. Bishop e7 is what I recommend. G4, the other move is bishop e3. Also, of course, covered in the main course, but here we look at this exciting line, g4, h6, bishop e3. And now the main idea here is b5, knight d5, and now very beautiful exchange sack in my course, bishop b7, allowing bishop b6, queen c8, and knight c7 check. And the idea is that after king f8, knight a8, we take the pawn on e4, and after rook g1, we take the knight, and we've got a tremendous compensation for the exchange. We've got a central pawn. We might want to push d5 next. Knight will be excellent either on d7 or c6, and the king will find good place on g7, while white king, in fact, is going to be quite weak. An exciting new direction. There aren't any games with this exchange stack, but it seems very interesting to me. Very good compensation, and the engines, all the chess engines, also approve of that. So I believe a very, very cool modern solution. Next, we look once again at the h3 line: e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, cd9, d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6, h3, and now after e5, knight d2. This is the most popular line here, and now h5 is my recommendation. Want to stop g4, knight g3. G3 is the move we'll consider here. Bishop e7, bishop g2, b5. Yeah, and here there is lots and lots of different options after knight d5, queen d5, and now rook a7. But I will just like to take a look at one, a very instructive line. Bishop e3, attacking the rook with the tempo. Rook b7, intending knight d7 and knight f6. Queen d2, now knight d7, long castle. And here, now that white has castled long, we will start our offensive on the queen side with b4. White tries to do something on the king side with f4. We go a5, we continue g4, and now a very instructive move. The reason I show this particular trainable line, h4, taking that g3 square away from the knight, very strong positional move. And after, for example, g5, another instructive regroup, rook c7, rook joins the c file, and after king b1, bishop b7, all our pieces are harmoniously employed. Next, we want to play queen a8, perhaps knight c5, hit that e4 pawn. So a very instructive line within the 6th h3 move. Next up on our list is 6 bishop e2, e4 c5, knight f3 d6, d4 takes, knight takes, knight f6, knight c3, a6, and this time we look at bishop e2, e5, and here I show one line with knight f3 and one line with knight b3. Knight f3, bishop e7 is my recommendation, a simple developing move. Bishop g5. White wants to take this knight and get control over the d5 square. It's fine by us. Bishop e6, bishop f6, bishop f6. We grab the bishop pair, castle, castle, knight d5. And now in this line, it will be very instructive how we play around the d5 square. We go knight d7, bishop c4. And here there are lots of games in the database. Of course, most players play the natural move, rook c8 or b5. But I would like to offer a very original and a very strong solution, queen to c8. Unusual move, but the idea is that after white defends the bishop, we'll bring the bishop to d8 and open the f-pawn. We'll see how it works. Queen e2, b5, bishop b3, bishop d8. And next we want to bring the knight to c5 and prepare f5. So the line goes a3, for example. Knight c5, bishop a2. White tries to safeguard his bishop. Now we go king h8, and we are ready for the f5 push, which will give us plenty of counterplay along the f-file. And also it's very good to undermine this e4 pawn. After rook a d1, we play f5, e5, bishop f5, and we're threatening bishop g4, pinning the knight and getting lots of play on the f-file. And after knight e3, we go bishop g6, insisting on getting that unpleasant pin. And next we play bishop h5, after rook d6, bishop h5, we're threatening e4, and white is already on the defensive. So a very cool solution here with queen c8. And the other line I'd like to show you is bishop to knight b3. So e4 c5, knight 3 d6, d4 takes, knight f6, knight c3, a6, bishop e2, e5, and now knight to b3. Bishop e7 is my main recommendation. I also give bishop e6 as alternative in my course. Very interesting, castle, castle. We'll look this time at bishop e3. There are lots of alternatives, of course. Bishop e6, queen d3, knight b7, and knight d5. This is one of the modern main lines. After bishop d5, ed, we get this very typical and a very complex strategic position. White's got majority on the queen side. We've got majority on the king side in the center. And here there are hundreds of high-level games and thousands of correspondent games. But there's only one game with the move I'd like to recommend, and that is played by one of the best theoreticians, Indian player Surya Shekhar Ganguly. He was a trainer of Vishy Anand and then became also trainer of Hare Krishna Pentala. And yeah, he's come up with this beautiful idea, h5, intending knight g4, and it works wonderfully in our main line that I'd like to show you. A4, white is trying to get his play as well. We play knight g4, bishop d2. There are alternatives, but I'd like to show you here the main line, f5, and after h3 we go e4 with the tempo, queen c4, now knight g to e5, and after queen b4 I really like the way to get that final push for counterplay. Very strong move, a5, deflecting the knight, inviting it to a5, and after knight a5 the point is revealed. We go f4, and the idea is that if white takes on e4, we can take the knight, and after rook a5, bishop a5, queen a5, we've got two strong knights for rook, which matter more here as the position is very closed. So this is the exciting little trainable line in bishop e2. Next is 6 move bishop c4. We start from the start, e4, c5, knight 3 d6, d4, takes, knight f6, knight c3, a6, and here 6 bishop c4. And here after bishop c4, there are plenty of lines. I'll just show you the most beautiful one, and actually this one, for a change, I decided to show a line where white is the one playing very beautifully. I think he deserves this. We shouldn't only see the beauty from our side, but also from our opponent potentially. So we go here e6, bishop b3, now b5. Important move order. Explain, of course, all the details in the course. I will not repeat that too often, not to bore you. You obviously understand. I obviously understand that, but do forgive me that I don't take the time and explain you all the intricacies. There is just no time as we go over so much material now so quickly. Anyway, the line I want to show you is bishop g5, bishop e7, queen f3, queen c7, e5, bishop b7. White doesn't win any material. The queen is attacked. E d6, bishop d6, queen e3. Now we pin the knight with bishop c5. We don't let any knight e6 sacrifices to happen. But the beautiful thing happens after long castle, knight c6. Knight on d4 is hanging. If the knight moves knight b5 or knight e6, there is bishop takes e3 with a check. So it seems as though white has to start defending, but it's not the case. He has a very beautiful queen sack. Queen takes e6. Beautiful idea, one of the most beautiful ideas in the opening you will probably ever see. Here we take the queen, knight takes e6, the queen e7. After rook h1, there is a remarkable position. White has sacrificed the queen for just 2 pawns, nothing more. But he's got this tremendous knight, and our king is extremely exposed. The rook is tremendous, bishop, and the other bishop cut us from all sides. The rook on d file is also doing a brilliant job, and here black would actually be in trouble if not for the fact that we have a queen for just 2 pawns. So we can return the queen for just 1 piece and still be up on material. That's what we do. We play queen takes e6, and after rook takes e6, we play knight e7. Rook d e1 is the follow-up. Now in the endgame already, there's not much to fear. In fact, we've gotten rid of this very strong knight, and we have a piece for just 2 pawns. Best move is rook d e1, and now we castle long, and white has to be accurate to keep equality. He takes on f6, gf6 plays knight e4, and after bishop e4, rook e4, f5, rook e5, bishop e6, rook e7. White wins back quite some material. After bishop e5, rook e5, we play rook h8, and the white has finally 2 pawns for the exchange, and he should probably hold this endgame without much problems. And yeah, this is a very beautiful line where white sacrifices queen. But if we know our stuff, we are more than fine here and have a perfect endgame. But you have to know, obviously, what you're doing, because it's very easy to get impressed, and it's not easy to return the queen for just 1 piece. That's exciting line in 6 bishop c4. Let's move on to the next trainable line. e4 c5, knight f3 d6, d4 c3, knight d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6, and now 6 g3 is the one that follows. Here I recommend e5. Now knight b3 and knight d2 are main options, but I want to show a very beautiful line after knight f3. Bishop e7, knight h4, castle. Knight f5, we can just take a play d5. So here I look at bishop g2. Now I like bishop g4, provoking bishop f3. Then we go bishop e6. Now the bishop is misplaced on f3. After castle, we play b5. White goes knight f5, b4, knight e7, queen e7. I will show you why I'm showing this particular line. It seems for now like a random line, but there will be a very nice little nuance later on. Knight d5, knight d5, e5. This is a typical pawn structure. Now black has majority on the king side center area. So black is going to play on the king side. White will try to open files on the queen side. We go here bishop h3, rook e1, knight d7, and after a3, this is the position I was going for. A very, very beautiful strategic resource here. White is about to activate his a1 rook and get some play on the queen side, but here we don't pay attention to material. We focus on activity of pieces, and we go b3. Brilliant strategic move, making sure the rook on a1 stays inactive at the cost of a pawn. And after cb, then we focus on our own play with f5, and then we want to push e4, jump with the knight to e5, or also go f4 in some lines. We play on the king side, but with this b3 sacrifice, we have stopped white from activating his rook. I think it's a very beautiful resource that I wanted to share with you in this line that arises after 6th move g3. I am sometimes looking down here because I have a list in which there is the right order of my trainable lines, so I don't want to have the order wrong. So that's why occasionally I will do this very sneaky looking down thing. Don't think I'm doing anything naughty. Anyway, e4, c5. Next we look at 6a4, knight f3, d6, d4, cd, knight d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6, and 6a4. Repositional system. Let's look here at the following line, e5. What I recommend, I usually recommend e5. Yeah, in this trainable line, I would like to showcase also that Najdorf can be a very positional opening. It doesn't have to always be about sacrifices. e5, knight f3, bishop e7, bishop c4, bishop e6, bishop b3, knight d7, bishop e3, rook c8. Very important motif. I say in my course like a million times that after castle, bishop e6, f3, knight g5 wins, so we should definitely avoid it. So I go rook c8, castle, now knight c5, bishop c5, rook c5. And here I want to pause for a bit. These kind of positions are very common in the Najdorf. Sometimes we get these positional battles. And here it is all about one thing, that f3 knight that wants to join the fight for the d5 square. It wants to reroute itself to e3 or b4. It wants to land on the d5 square, but we will do everything in our power to stop it. For example, after knight e1, we don't castle, which is naive, and allow knight d3, knight b4, knight d5, but we showcase our understanding. We play rook c8, and after knight d3, we play queen to a5, stopping knight b4. And next we'll castle, and white has achieved nothing with his knight maneuver. And in fact, if need be, we can also activate our bishop via d8 to b6 at some point. That's also an idea. So sometimes it's about these little positional moves that make the difference. Next up is sixth move, bishop d3. I'm taking you through like it's like a big sightseeing tour of the Najdorf, where you get like a 1 second, 1 second for each side. It's like I'm taking you to Paris and showing you the Eiffel Tower 1 second, 1 second in Louvre, you know, and 1 second Notre Dame and all that. But I hope it's still worth it. e4 c5, knight f3, d6, d4, cd, knight d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6, and now bishop d3. I recommend here e5, knight e2, bishop e7, castle, castle. In my course, I give also an extra option with bishop e6, knight g3, bishop e6, knight d5, bishop d5. In the course, I also give another option, knight d5, ed, bishop d5, a bunch of options that I give in this line just for fun. ed g6, stopping knight f5, c4, the main move, and now knight bd7. It's a fascinating position that I talk in great detail about. But here I'd like to show a trainable line, bishop h6, the main line, rook e8, rook c1, knight c5, hitting this bishop, bishop b1, and now a5. And here we start observing how the fight for dark squares goes. White goes b3, going for a3 before. If he goes a3 right away, we go a4. b3, now we play rook b8. Now a3 is met by b5. White is not in time to get his avalanche going. So white tries f4. This happened in Nepomniachtchi against Wojtaszek, and here Wojtaszek here took on f4, I believe, and it was also fine. But I give an extra option, bishop f8. And the following line is very instructive. I really like how it all works out for black move by move. White goes bishop g5. We take on f4, rook f4, and knight cd7. And here, black has tremendous dark square control. We've got this potential outpost on e5, the c5 square, this diagonal, and we've got all these squares. Everything's great, but white has a huge pressure along the f-file. Knight on f6 is under enormous pressure, so it will be a very close battle. Who will prevail? But I really like how black manages to defend himself. After queen f3, we go bishop g7, rook f1. It seems as though white is going to break our defense on the f-file, but we have a check first, very important, king h1. Now knight e5 with the tempo, hitting the queen. And next, after queen d1, we can play knight fd7, and suddenly everything is guarded. f7 pawn is protected by the knight. Queen managed to step out of the pin here. So we got this perfect regroup. And now with the knight on e5 and everything protected, it's our turn to start the play, and we'll play on the queen side with a4. We might want to open the a-file, bring the rook in, and so on and so forth. Very instructive regroup here, starting from this moment. Bishop g7, queen b6, knight e5, knight fd7. I think it's very, very pretty. That is our bishop d3 variation. The other thing I would like to show is After e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, cd9, d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6, 6th move f4. Here I recommend d5 as well. A main move is knight b3, not very dangerous either, but here I like to look at knight b3, knight c6, f5, bishop e7. f5 is a bit premature when bishop is on c8, when it doesn't come with a tempo. I speak about these positions a lot. Usually black has a good follow-up, so here I like this move bishop e7. And after bishop g5, there's a very nice tactic. Hope you can find it. That's indeed knight takes e4. If bishop e7, there is knight takes c3, taking the queen as well. After white takes our queen. And if knight e4, we take bishop g5. Now after knight d6, we can play king e7. The best white has is queen h5, hitting the bishop on g5. Then we take the knight, queen g5 and queen f6. Now king is very safe. We want to win the f5 pawn, and the endgame is going to be slightly better for black. Just a sweet little tactic. Why not? Next on the list is 6th move, knight b3, e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, cd, knight d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6, and now, yeah, knight b3. One of the sidelines, one of the very sidelines. The idea of the system is to brace for e5. Now after e5, white goes bishop g5 and gets control over the d5 square. Here we go e6. We allow g4. Yeah, here we get this typical Scheveningen, or the Scheveningen, as they say in the Anglo-speaking world. Typical this Scheveningen type play, like in the famous Karpov-Kasparov match. Perhaps if you remember the last game, which made Garry Kasparov a world champion, perhaps you will find similarities with the following line that I'm going to give you. b5, a3, bishop b7, bishop g2, knight fd7. We anyway have to dodge g5 push, g5, knight c6, h4, bishop e7, f4. White is trying to push on the king side, advance. We will not worry. We will start our counterplay, knight b6. Knight is heading to c4, f5, castle, queen g4, principled and threatening. White wants to take on e6, but moreover, he wants to go f6, trap our bishop. We have to address that. We go ef. Now we play rook e8, threatening bishop f8 check. And after castle, we play knight e5. We want to trade these bishops. And after queen h3, bishop g2, queen g2. Here, a very strong sequence starts. We grab, first of all, some squares in the center with d5. And after f6, we go bishop d6, fg7. And now, very strong, typical Sicilian play. We, of course, led the pawn on g7. Staking it would be very bad. The pawn is well known to be a protector of a king. Even if it's a white pawn, it doesn't matter. It shields the king a little bit. And now we start exposing white's weak king with a very strong idea, rook c8, introducing the idea of rook c4, rook g4 in the position. And yeah, I really like this typical Scheveningen takeover of the initiative here. And if knight d4, knight coming to f5 is not really happening because of bishop c5 beating the knight. So this is a very instructive line. And with that, we had our little sightseeing tour of the Najdorf. But of course, the course is also filled with sidelines. So I'm going to share with you quite a few. We'll work backwards. So first sideline on move 4, e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, cd. Here, queen takes d4. Let's look at this here. Knight c6, bishop b5, bishop d7, bishop c6, knight c3. This is a very old sideline, quite popular. White wants to play bishop g5 and castle along. This looks quite threatening, but against the modern computers and the modern players that are equipped with modern computers, this is no longer this dangerous. I'll show you one example of how this can backfire for white. Knight f6, bishop g5, e6, long castle, bishop e7. Rook h1, and now we can castle. And here one old line went e5, d5, queen h4. Plenty of games in the database. Black just plays queen c7, knight e5, just rook fd8. And it turned out that knight g4, which was considered a threat, is no longer this good, because we can just take on g4. Well, first we can take on d1, rook d1, and then take on g4. And after bishop e7, very strong move. Knight to h6, a very nice regroup. And after bishop d6, we have knight f5 intermezzo, hitting the queen. And after bishop c7, knight h4, at the endgame, of course, black is very safe. And after g3, knight f3, it's black who is better. as he's just got a better knight and a very good bishop, and f6, king f7 is coming. So yeah, these kind of nuances like knight takes g4 and knight h6, they change the evaluation completely from interesting for white to just slightly better for black. That's for fourth move, queen takes d4. Another very, very big sideline that is barely a sideline, that is 3 bishop b5 check. It is one of the biggest chapters of my course, bishop b5. After e4, c5, knight f3, d6, bishop b5. A massive, massive variation. Here we look at one. We look at a very beautiful one, by the way, and a very beautiful novelty will be shown here. So brace for it and enjoy. Knight d7. Castle knight a6, bishop d3, knight f6, rook e1, e6, and here main move is c3, but also very popular is the move a4, stopping b5. Here we played b6, we have to develop the bishop, c3, bishop b7, and now if white plays bishop c2, we have c4, not letting d4 to happen, and so many players have played queen e2. In fact, Peter Svidler himself played it twice, and here nobody has found the following reply, which is very strong, immediately pointed out by the modern the strongest modern engines, and that is a g5, very beautiful push, using the fact that white's pieces are misplaced, queenside is underdeveloped, and the queen on e2 is very badly placed, as we'll see. If knight takes g5, we go rook g8, the rook comes to the semi-open file, knight f3, and now hitting him with d5, opening this b7 bishop, and after e5, we go knight h5, and next we come knight f4 with the tempo, queen is hanging, d4 is coming, and these pieces are still underdeveloped. Rook on g8 is doing a great job. Tremendous line, huge idea g5. Black is almost winning after g5, practically speaking, and also objectively black is much better. Just a huge novelty, never been played before. And you get it here, the short, sweet course. Isn't it beautiful? Okay, another e4, c5, knight f3, d6. Another thing I'd like to look at is a third move, sidelines. In this context, it's knight c3. Yeah, this is going to be a nice little tactical exercise that I wanted to share with you. You will enjoy that. Knight f6 and h3. This line was played against me by Hikaru Nakamura. I think also Alireza played it. Alireza Firuza. White is trying to move all Ras into something, but it's fine. We play knight c6, d4, c knight d4, e5, similar to the Najdorf, but a little different. But it's fine. White's h3 move has not been very useful. Here Hikaru played against me knight c6 and 1 hour blitz game, and after bc, yeah, we got this typical structure. It's always okay for black. c6 pawn controls the d5 square. It's close to the center, but position is not very remarkable. But down the line, there's going to be a nice tactic that I would like you to solve. Bishop c4, bishop e7, castle, queen e2. Here I can play black can play bishop e6. The trade would be fine, but I played knight d7, which is fine. Bring the knight to b6. Rook d1, knight b6, bishop e3, a5. Here knight e4 would be safe, but Hikaru played more ambitiously. Bishop e3. If a4, white will take the pawn. So I went bishop a6. Now Hikaru went queen g4, aggressive move. I go just king h8, introducing the idea of f5. And here Hikaru made a very unsuspecting blunder. He played f4, and now black has a very unusual, well, not unusual, it's a very unexpected. Unexpected is the fact that black is winning here, in fact, in one move. So I'm curious if you can find it. Yes, it's a4, a very nice resource. Now after f4, bishop b6 is no longer good because of queen takes b6 check to the king. And if knight a4, then surprising knight a4, bishop a4, and bishop back to c8, hitting the queen and hitting the bishop. And that's a trick that Hikaru blundered. But he was not the biggest loser of the day because I was in a horrible shape in that Bliss tournament, and I eventually lost this game. But anyway, nice trick. This one I found, so that's pretty nice. And then we have a few sidelines left that I'd like to share with you. One is e4, c5, knight c3, d6, and f4, the so-called Grand Prix attack. And here I'd like to show you one very beautiful line that I've come across while working for the course. g6 with fianchetto the bishop, knight f3, bishop g7. Now white has choice between bishop c4 and bishop b5 check first. In this context, we'll look at bishop b5 check, bishop g7, and now bishop c4. There are some subtleties and some reasons why it's good to provoke it. After knight c6, d3, e6, f5. In some lines, after bishop f4, the pawn on d6 will hang. That's the point. Here I recommend G5, E5, and D5. And after bishop B5, knight G7. It's a messy position. Let's just look at the line I show because it's beautiful. Bishop C6, Bishop C6, FE, FE, Queen E2. Now I recommend the pawn sack, castle, Queen A6, King H8, Bishop G5. We're pinned, but we go D4. Knight E4. If takes on E7, we have Rook E8, and we win back some material there on the pins. But Knight E4 is the main move. And now Queen D5. And if White takes the knight with Queen E7, we have a very, very beautiful follow-up Rook A8. Queen is escaping, Queen C7. White has a full piece up, but there is Rook takes E4. Now White has a Rook up, but after D, Queen D4, King D2. Now a very strong move, D3, threatening Queen B4, but mainly Queen 2 first, of course. Here, White has huge problems. Despite being a Rook up, we have a huge attack. A Bishop on G7 is strong. King is terribly weak. And yeah, this is a very beautiful line I wanted to share with you as well. In the Grand Prix attack, if Black knows his stuff, it's not clear who will be attacking. And finally, a couple more sidelines after E4, C5. C3, we play the so-called Alapin. White wants to grab center with D4. Here we play knight F6, hitting the pawn, E5, knight D5. And I'll give you another very beautiful line that I've come across while studying the Alapin. Knight F3, D6, D4, CD, Queen D4. Dangerous sideline. If you don't know it, E6, knight B2, knight C6, Bishop B5. It's quite tricky. Bishop D7, take, knight C4. And I know it's tricky because I once faced it in a blitz game and I didn't manage to solve my opening problems with Black. I was not well prepared. But now we know. We go B5, stopping the move C4. After knight D6, Bishop D6, ED. Now after castle, we threaten to take the pawn. And here, very beautiful line can arise after move B3, which is very principled. White wants to push for C4 after all. Once he gets the knight out and the D6 pawn protected, White will be, of course, in a great shape. But here Black takes the pawn, and after C4, he has a remarkable way of continuing BC. Knight appears to be lost, but we have E5, Queen D2. Queen D2 is important to stop any Queen B4, a check business. Queen is now still pinning the knight, so it seems as though White wins a piece, but that's not the case. We have Queen G6, very strong, and after CD, an even more strong, a silent move. Not Queen takes G2, because Rook G1, but a silent move, Bishop B5, cutting the king like a knife, making sure the king can never castle. And this is a very beautiful, picturesque position. Black has, I wouldn't say it's a long-term piece sack, but it's sort of a slow, I don't even know how to call it, but we have tremendous compensation here for the piece, a huge attack, because the king can just never castle. Bishop on b5 is just such a strong piece that you cannot interpose it, and we will slowly come after the king. There is no direct threat besides Queen takes G2. I mean, White can protect from Queen takes G2, play a move like Rook G1, but then we can play Rook F to D8, Rook A to C8. We'll bring our rooks, and eventually there will be a threat on the king. Rook A8, Rook C2 would be a threat, for example. And yeah, we have the slow killing attack, a very, very beautiful line. Now I'd like to show you one last line, the second move sideline, the bone cloud. But I will not show it because this is a free, short and sweet. So we'll put the bone cloud behind the paywall. So thank you for watching, and hope you got curious enough, inspired enough to try out the Najdorf, study it more, and perhaps even get my course, the full lifetime repertoire, the Najdorf. So thank you for watching. Bone cloud is bad, it's a joke. Thank you for watching, and see you. Go get my Najdorf course at Chessable. It will give you a complete lifetime repertoire against the first move 1e4 and have you covered with an exciting and a sharp weapon. Good luck.